What are the definitions for tau and delta? So, we have seen a little bit of this in the earlier classes. So, tau was given in terms of a doubly asymptotic limit. So, there was an advection limit to it, and then a limit in the low Reynolds number flows. So, it has been tweaked a little bit. So, a tau has been proposed, which is kind of a smooth function. So, this is the advection limit, this here is the diffusion limit, and mk is a coefficient which actually is defined as 1/3 times twice of Ck. It suffices to say that Ck is some kind of a constant, and for the linear elements or the bilinear elements that we have been using in this course, the minimum would always be 1/3, so one can simply use that. But when you go to higher order elements, then of course this becomes important. Okay, delta is the stabilization coefficient for the least squares term for the continuity equation, and that now depends on this h by 2 times the magnitude of the advection times this coefficient xi, and xi again depends on the Reynolds number. So, this is the double asymptotic limit that we had already talked about. So, Re here is the element or the cell Reynolds number. Earlier we had written them in terms of Peclet number, but one can also represent it in terms of element Reynolds number. So, here is the definition of the element Reynolds number, very similar to what was given earlier. Notice m for bilinear and linear elements would be 1/3. So, that is what you would get, a factor h times u divided by 12 and the viscosity. What about h? H is the element length. So, in one dimension it is quite straightforward, but once you go to multi dimensions, for example in 2 or 3 dimensions, then there are many possibilities of element length. So, some definitions are given over here. One possibility is to use the minimum element length. So, you find out the edges, all the edge lengths, and use the minimum edge length. A here is the area, and diag is h diag is the length of the diagonals. So, some formulas are written over here. Or you could also use the maximum element length if you would like, or you could use an element length in the streamwise direction, as was also proposed in an earlier session. So, many of these definitions are possible, and people have kind of experimented with them. There are several other definitions also that are possible, but I am not listing them here. But of all these three, our experience shows that the minimum length kind of performs the best. I want to give you some flavor about the compressible flows. Okay. So, again, as was the case with incompressible flows, we have a whole set of variables that one can use. For example, we can use the primitive variables, where one could have the velocity components, the velocity vector, the density, pressure, and the temperature. So, this could be one set of variables. Or we could use what are called as the conservation variables, okay. So, which is density, and density times the velocity, so that is the momentum, and then the density times the total energy. Or one could use entropy variables, and several other possibilities exist. So, you can choose these variables on your convenience and on your liking, but the issues remain fairly similar. So, one of the biggest issues is that when you go to compressible flows, you can get shock waves. So, we would like to make sure that we satisfy the jump conditions across the shock. Okay. So, there should be conservation of fluxes, the Rankine-Hugenoy conditions. We must satisfy the second law of thermodynamics. Okay. So, entropy should follow the distribution that satisfies the second law. Again, the issue of accuracy and stability of these calculations is important, and the computational effort, because when you go to compressible flows, then you can see that your number of variables are large. In fact, if you also include chemistry, where you have reacting flows, then you could have a large number of unknowns, and this effort could become extremely large. So, very briefly in a nutshell, the Navier-Stokes equations in the conservation form, I have written them down over here, 3 balance laws. The first one is the mass balance, the second one is the force balance, and the third one is the energy balance. Okay. So, here the variables that we use are density, the velocity, P is denoted, P denotes pressure, and then the viscous stress tensor is denoted by uppercase T, and small e here denotes the total energy, whereas Q is the heat flux vector. The viscous stress tensor, as was the case earlier, now has depends on the gradient of the velocity field. So, first the symmetric part of the gradient, the strain rate tensor, and then there is the other term which depends on the divergence of the velocity field. So, there are these 2 coefficients of viscosity mu and lambda, and by Stokes relation we actually assume that lambda is exactly equal to minus 2/3 of mu. For the ideal gases, we assume the equation of state, which is P is rho times R times the temperature. So, gamma is the ratio of specific heats, I is the internal energy, which actually is can also be written in terms of the total energy. So, total energy consists of the internal energy and the kinetic energy. Okay. So, we are neglecting the potential energy term inside E, but that can always be included as body force in the force balance equation. I therefore is the internal energy, and in the next slide we will show you how that is related to the temperature field. So, we are going to use Q, the heat flux vector, by the Fourier laws in terms of the gradient of the temperature field and the coefficient of heat conductivity. Theta is the temperature, and theta is related to the internal energy with these constants here. So, gamma is, as you know, the ratio of specific heats, and R is the ideal gas constant. Prandtl number is going to relate the viscosity of the fluid to the heat conductivity. So, we will assume that is given to us. So, once we have all these constants, we can actually write these equations that we had written earlier in this kind of a conservation variables formulation. So, U here is the vector of all the conservation variables. So, in 2 dimensions it is shown that it has 4 components. The first is the density, the second is the density times the x component of velocity, the second one is density times the second component of velocity, and the fourth is density times the total energy. And then I have these Fi is the Euler flux, so again corresponding to the 4 equations. So, the first row corresponds to the continuity equation, the mass balance. The second and third row, they correspond to the force balance, and then finally the last row corresponds to the energy equation. And likewise I could have a viscous flux. So, there is no contribution to the viscous flux from the mass balance equation, and these are the contributions from the force balance and the energy balance equations. So, I can in a very compact manner write down the equations, all the equations in this manner. These are of course non-linear equations. As you can see, it has F has several non-linear terms. Okay. Non-linearity with respect to velocities, non-linearity with respect to velocities and temperature, and of course the kinetic energy as well, and so on. So, therefore, what we do is we try to linearize them. So, we state them in a quasi-linear form. So, we rewrite these equations. So, that is how these terms are written. So, AI times del u by del xi has been is the one which kind of replaces the earlier term, the del f by del x term, and That is how we do this quasi-linearization. So, in this equation, AI is the Euler-Jacobian matrix, and Kij we refer to it as the diffusivity matrix, and that is how they are defined here. So, now we are going to use this form of the equation to write down our finite element formulation in the conservation variables formulation, and these are the boundary and initial conditions. So, there could be a boundary condition, a Dirichlet boundary condition, a boundary condition on fluxes that would give us a Neumann condition, and then of course initial condition for all the variables. So, we would have initial conditions for the density, the velocities, and of course the temperature field, and from that we can derive the equation, the conditions for the variables, the conservation variables. So, what are the difficulties that we expect in the compressible flows? So, again, because mostly the compressible flows would be at high Reynolds number, these are again advection dominated, these are non-linear. So, the same issues that we had for incompressible flows, that the Galerkin method would result in node to node oscillations, we need to stabilize. So, we use the SUPG kind of methods. In addition, we are going to get the Gibbs phenomena. So, we are using C0 functions, continuous functions to represent shocks. So, we are going to get overshoots and undershoots upstream and downstream of the shocks, and essentially to address that we use things called shock capturing operator. Sometimes people also use shock fitting methods. And then the boundary conditions are a little bit tricky because they depend on the flow Mach number. So, the characteristics would be different, as the Mach number changes, we go from subsonic to transonic to supersonic, and in fact the characteristics of the equations may change with both space and time. So, boundary conditions are quite tricky for compressible flows, and sometimes they need to be implemented in a non-linear manner. So, the formulation is written in terms of conservation variables, but the boundary conditions could be in terms of primitive variables and so on, and therefore one needs to account for that as well. The pressure oscillations that could occur for incompressible flows can come back and haunt us if we are at low Mach numbers. So, especially if we are looking at flow over a body, then close to the body, even if the outer flow is supersonic inside the boundary layer, if it is a viscous flow, we could get very low Mach number, and then again we could get pressure locking. So, we have to watch out for that as well. So, with that in mind, I will give you a sketch of the formulations, the stabilized formulations for compressible flows. So, again we are going to assume there are NEL number of elements, there are number of degrees of freedom per node, and the element number is, the counter is denoted by E, and we are going to propose the trial function space as well as the weight function space, fairly standard as we have been doing before, and notice that these are now vector functions. So, there are multiple degrees of freedom at each nodal point. The finite element formulation is given by this equation over here. The green terms are the Galerkin terms. Okay, so, it is quite straightforward. We simply take the weight function and then take the inner product of that with the residual, and we would straight away get the Galerkin formulation. As before, we integrate by parts the higher order terms, and we also get as a result the boundary conditions on the fluxes in terms of the fluxes. So, that is the Galerkin term, quite straightforward, except that now the W's and U's are vectors, and we have already seen in earlier sessions how to handle them. The red term here is actually the SUPG. So, we take the residual of all the flow equations. So, notice these are not integrated by parts, so these are element level integrals. So, this here in the square brackets is the residual of the equation, and this now is hit in general by tau and A transpose times gradient of W. Okay, so, the idea is the same, these are the SUPG terms. Now, let us come to the blue term. The blue term is a very interesting term. This is needed only if we have shock capturing. So, if we have shocks in the flow, then we use this term to essentially get rid of the overshoots and undershoots and the corresponding instabilities that might arise out of it. I will explain that to you a little bit in the next slide. So, we have already spoken about this, the Galerkin formulation, the green ones. Then we had stabilization terms as element level matrices. Then the red terms were the SUPG stabilizations that would stabilize against the advection dominated instabilities. And then we had the shock capturing terms, the blue ones, which would help stabilize against sharp gradients. The time discretization we can do in fact using the generalized trapezoidal rule. So, if we use alpha equal to half, we are going to get time accurate results, but if you want to go to steady states, then we can use alpha equal to 1 and take reasonably large time steps. So, these are the stabilization coefficients. I am not going to go in too much of detail, but there is this tau which now is because of advection, and notice there is also the speed of sound that comes in along with the flow speed, and then there is a component because of the diffusion. So, this is derived from the doubly asymptotic nature of the stabilization coefficient in the limit of advection dominance and diffusion dominance. Delta is the coefficient for the shock capturing operator, and that is a little bit tricky. So, to compute that because it is residual based, we introduce these Riemann metric tensor A0 inverse. So, you will have to read a little bit about this. I think this is beyond the scope of this course, but I hope you get an idea that these are also going to be residual based, these coefficients, and thereby the method is going to be consistent.